The Tokina 20mm f2 is an affordable wide-angle prime, but is it actually better than the Sony 20mm f1.8? Well, today, my friend, we're going to find out. When placed side by side, there's really not a lot separating these two lenses in terms of size. However, the Tokina is just over 90 grams heavier than the Sony, which does mean that it's noticeably heavier in the hand. The Tokina is pretty void of features, with only a manual focus dial on the lens body. The Sony, on the other hand, is a totally different story. It includes a manual focus ring, a manual MF to AF switch, an aperture dial that can be declicked using a switch on the side, a customizable AF lock button, as well as a dust and moisture resistant construction complete with rubber O-ring around the lens mount. When shooting in manual focus mode, the Sony has a silky smooth and responsive action to it, though there is very little in the way of resistance on the dial, making it super sensitive to your adjustments. The Tokina is also very nice and responsive with a pleasing amount of resistance, but there is a slight rattling sound as you rotate the focus ring. So in terms of cost, the Tokina is significantly cheaper than the Sony, priced at £649 or $595 on Amazon, whilst the Sony will set you back around £945 or $898. This means that the Tokina picks up an early point for price in this round. Both of these lenses feel very nicely put together, so I'm going to have to award both of them a point for build. However, for handling, the lighter weight and the additional features that the Sony lens offers is definitely enough to give it the winning point for handling. When it comes to autofocus, in good lighting conditions, both lenses are quick to focus with no signs of hunting. Though if I was really starting to split hairs, the Sony is definitely the faster of the two. For some reason, the Tokina appears to focus just past the subject and then quickly jump back into focus, which does slow things down a bit. In low light conditions, both lenses slowed marginally, but still no signs of hunting at all. When shooting in continuous mode and shooting wide open at the lens's respective maximum apertures, neither lens offered a really faultless result, with both dropping focus occasionally throughout the walk. Though it must be said that the majority of the resulting images that we took were sharp and in focus. So with pretty even results in this round, both lenses pick up a point. When shooting a moving target in video mode while still shooting wide open at the lens's respective maximum apertures, both lenses managed to keep locked onto George as he walked towards the camera at a regular pace. When repeating the test at a faster pace, both lenses continue to put in a very good performance. When it comes to AF noise, this is where things start to differ slightly. Put it this way, the Sony is a bit like walking through a field of flowers on a warm summer's day. Yep, that's right. No noise at all. Just you and the peace and quiet. Now, the Tokina, on the other hand, well... Yep, it's a bit like walking through a field of flowers that's next to a Slipknot concert. I push my fingers into my ears to block out that horrible AF motor. Focus breathing is also a bit of a problem for both of these lenses, so videographers everywhere will probably be throwing up in their mouths a little bit right now whilst watching this footage. I'm sorry about that. So when it comes to scoring, although yes, the Tokina does have an AF motor that sounds like somebody's chewing a bag of sand next to your ear, I don't think that's enough of a sin to deny it a point in this round, because in every test it managed to stand toe to toe with the Sony. So in my world, I'm going to award points all round here, but if AF noise is really a big deal to you and you think it would just drive you insane, then please feel free to ignore my judgment here and deduct a point from the Tokina. In our Bokeh balls test, the Sony lens produces slightly larger orbs thanks to its wider maximum aperture of f1.8, though apart from that, the results are actually pretty similar, with round orbs in the center turning slightly misshapen as they near the edges of the frame. When it comes to general bokeh quality, the results again are very, very close. Now, if we act like we're on the set of CSI for a moment and zoom in and enhance on these images, you'll see that the Sony does offer very slightly softer bokeh than the Tokina, but it is incredibly close, and I would argue that only bokeh connoisseurs would actually notice this difference in real life. But when it comes to handing out points in this round, I am going to have to be super picky here and award the point to Sony, as technically it does have softer bokeh and larger bokeh balls. However, because it was just so close, probably some of the closest results I've seen for such a long time, I am going to award half a point to Tokina because it's by no means a slouch when it comes to bokeh. In our lens flare test, both lenses control flaring and artifacting pretty well, though as is common with most lenses these days, both of these options do come included with lens hoods in the box, which will offer additional protection from glare. On a longitudinal chromatic aberration test, both lenses displayed green fringing at the top and red fringing below the area of sharp focus. Now, when it comes to shooting real-life images with these lenses, I can honestly say that both were a joy to use. 20mm is super wide for shooting portraits, but when you're in a setting as grand as this, it was actually a lot of fun to try and incorporate more of the background into the shot and not just rely on your model. When looking through my images, I'd noticed that both lenses do suffer from barrel distortion and a touch of vignetting at the corners when shooting wide open, but these are issues that could be easily cleaned up using the lens correction profiles available to you in Lightroom. Though on the plus side, neither lens struggled to focus at any point when shooting straight into super bright sunlight. So that meant I came away at the end of the day with a ton of pin-sharp images to choose from. Looking at these portraits, it's actually really hard to tell which lens is actually the best in terms of sharpness. It's only when you take a quick look at the lens chart results that you can see when shooting wide open at each of the lens's respective maximum apertures, the Sony is the sharper option of the two. It's also the same deal at the corners, where the Sony provides a crisper result. Now, if you do happen to like shooting close up with your 20mm for some reason, the Sony has the edge here too, as it has a much shorter minimum focusing distance than the Tokina. Though interestingly, when shooting at this distance wide open, both lenses are pretty much on par when it comes to sharpness. So at the end of this round, the Sony has shown that it is the better option when it comes to image quality and therefore wins the final point. So although the Sony does take the crown in this matchup, I have to give kudos to the Tokina. For a lens that is significantly cheaper than its rival, it's actually a pretty decent option. I mean, sure, it has an AF motor only a mother could love, but that is genuinely the only real complaint I have about this lens, and it's definitely something I would recommend to anyone shopping for a 20mm lens on a budget.